Stay tuned for urban legends to ghostly tales of the paranormal, because now it's time for
Message on the Wall.
This is Message on the Wall's presentation of what must be one of America's most renowned hauntings, the case of the Bell Witch. It was in 1804 or 5 that John Bell moved with his wife Lucy and their 5 children to an area of Tennessee known as the Barren Plains. John Bell had purchased land along with a large house for his growing family, with a further 3 children being born. John Bell was a farmer, and planting crops acquired more land until it became a 328-acre estate. John Bell also became an elder of the Red River Baptist Church, a major part of the pioneering community, but due to a dispute over the ownership of a slave with a neighbour named Benjamin Batts, John Bell was taken to court over the matter and found guilty. In turn, this gave the church elders a leeway to excommunicate John Bell as bringing the church into disrepute. No one can say for sure what it was that came to cause the family so much trouble. By this time, witch hunting was past its prime, with the Salem witch trials having taken place in 1692, and this was the year 1817. Though witch trials were far and few between, the belief was still there, and so whatever had brought this curse or demon upon the family had to have been a witch, and so it is now forever known as the Bell Witch. John Bell was certainly its main focus, and tormenting him for 3 years, claimed responsibility for his death. The troubles, beginning in a small way, seemed to coincide with an incident involving John Bell. It was when he was checking his crops that between a row of corn he saw an animal described as having the body like a dog, with the head more like a rabbit. Of course, we don't know how far away the animal was, or how good, at 67 years old, his eyesight was. John Bell shot at the animal a number of times before it disappeared. It was that same evening that the family heard a thudding against the walls of the log cabin house that was thought to come from outside. From then on, each night came the same sounds, increasing in velocity, and each night John Bell and his sons would go outside to try and catch whoever was responsible, but of course there was never anyone to be seen. Like a growing force, more and more things began to happen. The children, the youngest being 4-year-old Joel, would wake in the night to what sounded like rats snoring at their beds. They also had their bed covers pulled from them, and their pillows would fly onto the floor. Then there was a voice, no more than a whisper, that of a female, the voice of an old woman, maybe a witch. As it grew in intensity, it was heard to be singing hymns. Apart from John Bell, the child that was to suffer most was their second of 2 daughters, who had been born in the house 2 years after the family moved from North Carolina. Elizabeth Bell, known as Betsy, was 11 years old when the strange occurrences began. Betsy would be slapped and pinched and have her hair pulled, leaving handprints on her face and welts on her body. The voice grew stronger that it was able to converse, always seemingly looking kindly upon John Bell's wife, Lucy, but it would echo John Bell with threats that it would kill him. John Bell was insistent that their troubles should not be talked about outside the family, but things became so strained that he eventually told his friend and neighbour, James Johnston, asking him to bless the house and perform an exorcism. Both James Johnston and his wife got proof of the family's suffering when they stayed the night. hearing for themselves the phenomena, with James Johnston being slapped after the covers were pulled from the bed. News of the Bell family troubles soon began to spread, reaching the ears of future President Major General Andrew Jackson. 3 of the sons, Jesse, John and Drury Bell, had all served under Jackson against Indians and the British. Taking an interest in the Bell case, Jackson decided to pay a visit. With an entourage that included at least one person that claimed to be a witch-finder, Jackson and a small group of soldiers paid the Bells a visit. It was as the wagon reached the lane to the house that it stopped in its tracks, with the horses seemingly unable to pull the load. This went on for several minutes before a voice was heard, with the entity telling Jackson that they could proceed. At that, the horses were once again able to pull the wagon, and the men proceeded on to the house. The group waited for the entity to do more, but all was quiet as Jackson and John Bell talked of everyday matters. Finally, one of the group announced that he was a witch-finder, and, producing a gun, said the witch hadn't done anything because she had been frightened off, as it contained silver bullets that would kill any evil spirit. To prove that it hadn't been scared off, the man's body jerked as he began to scream, part in fear and part in pain. As he said, it felt like he was being pricked by pins as he was being punched. He soon found he wasn't welcome in the house, as an unseen force ejected him through the door. The voice then said there was another fraud that would get similar treatment the following evening. Though the soldiers begged Jackson to leave, he was too intrigued. And with the soldiers setting up camp outside, Jackson remained until the following morning. There are no accounts of whether the Bell Witch did torment another in Jackson's party. The terror continued unabating, becoming even worse for poor Betsy. Having been friends with a neighbouring boy, their friendship blossomed into romance, and to the delight of both sets of parents, Betsy and Joshua Gardner were engaged. The only thing that wasn't happy was the entity. For some reason the Bell Witch was intent on splitting the couple, constantly telling Betsy not to marry Joshua, not leaving the couple alone with its taunting. Finally Betsy could take no more, and broke off the engagement. It hadn't been any better for John Bell either. He began to have spasms and seizures, growing worse until he became confined to the house, with the entity physically torturing and cursing him. It came to an end for John Bell on December the 20th in 1820, after 3 years of what must have been sheer hell. But his dying didn't see an end to the Bell Witch, with a voice gleefully announcing that it had killed him, having poisoned him. The family found a small vial of liquid in a cupboard, and to prove the entity right or wrong, John Bell Jr. gave some to the cat, which died instantly. It was John Bell's funeral that appears to have appeased the Bell Witch. There was a large turnout to see John Bell off, one of the largest to be seen in Robertson County. Being interred in what is now the old Bell Cemetery, the disembodied voice was heard to sing bawdy songs. John's wife, Lucy, remained in the house until her death 17 years later. Of John and Lucy's 8 children, the eldest, Jesse, had married the year the Bell Witch began its reign of terror. After his mother's death, Jesse moved his family to Mississippi. The second son, John Bell Jr., was the more fearless, standing up to the entity, but in later years described to his son, Charles Bailey Bell, the conversations he had with it. Like his father, John was a farmer amassing 600 acres of land. Drury Bell, the third son, never married. He was the first to see what he believed was a bell witch, in the form of a large black bird that he took a shot at, only for it to disappear into thin air. Drury made a home for himself across the river from the Bell farm. The first daughter born to John and Lucy Bell was Esther. She married Alexander Porter the same year as the terror began. Shortly before her mother's death, she moved with her family to Mississippi. After Esther, another son was born named Zadok. Wishing to become a lawyer, he had no experiences with the entity during its height of terror, as he was possibly away serving an apprenticeship. Only surviving his father by 6 years, Zadok fell foul of a fever epidemic that ravaged a region of Florida where he was working. The 6th child was Betsy, who was the first to be born at the Bell farm, only 1 or 2 years after the Bells had moved in. 4 years after her father's death, Betsy married her former teacher, Richard Powell. She would never talk about what happened to her outside of family members, and being the longest-lived of her siblings, passed away in 1888 at the age of 82. The 7th child and 5th son, who was also born at the Bell farm, was Richard William Bell. Although he was only 6 years old when the haunting began, he remembered the trauma that his family went through, recounting it in detail. His written account was passed on to his son. When Alan Bell wrote a book, he included this as a chapter called Our Family Trouble, keeping within the wishes that nothing should be revealed until all of John Bell's immediate family had died. The book was published 6 years after Betsy's passing. The last child of John and Lucy, again a son, was named Joel Egbert Bell. Being 4 years old, he had heard the stories of his mother's and siblings' experiences. When the Bell house was demolished, Joel built himself a house only half a mile away, using some of the bricks and logs from the house where he was born. But he didn't remain. Moving to Springfield, he sold the house to his brother Richard. Maybe some of the essence of the Bell Witch moved with the logs and bricks, as the new house built from them is claimed to have had a number of strange occurrences. You have been listening to Message on the Wall, brought to you in association with Paranormal Parodies. You can find Paranormal Parodies at paranormal-parodies.com.